Tomcat plugins for Maven do support that. As you saw in the file, connectors that I defined for Jetty. The Tomcat's a little simpler. You just define an HTTP port, an HTTPS port, and then you have to pass in, the key store and the key store password files. But you'll also want to use these variables and pass them into either your Maven failsafe plugin or your Surefire plugin, so it actually accepts those credentials. Otherwise, your test will fail with invalid SSL credentials. Couldn't do the negotiation. And like I said, one of the biggest reasons that whole Ajax login thing worked, especially in Firefox, is because we set these headers. And that access control allow credentials, someone actually patched the project that I had out there for me, told me about that one line and it made it work. So that was pretty important, with allowing credentials. Also with passing those credentials in that jQuery call. And then if you look at the bottom there, there's a blog post, so you can just Google like Ajax jQuery Raible. That should come up on top and show you how I actually implemented that whole thing. So the other thing I want to talk about is securing a REST API, and this would be an API that would return XML or JSON. And the most common way I've seen it done is just with basic authentication. The reason for that is most HTTP libraries out there for almost all languages support basic authentication. And a lot of times that's good enough for web services. You can also use developer keys, which you'll see like Twitter does this, LinkedIn does this, where you establish a key and then you're allowed to talk to their API. It's especially popular with Twitter iPhone apps, where that app actually has a key. One thing that I've been wanting to experiment with is using OAuth to do that. How many people have heard of OAuth? How many people are currently using it? So we have a couple. Are you using OAuth 1 or 2? 2? What about you?
I'm just using Facebook's.
Okay, so you're talking to their OAuth provider. Are you an OAuth provider then for clients?
We're trying to set it up for left page.
Okay. So the OAuth 1 spec I've heard is terrible. I started working with it with OAuth 1.1a, and now they have 2 OAuth that seems to be much better. What OAuth does is when you hit a site, it actually prompts you to go to another site, log in there, and then come back and you can access that data. And so here's how it works. Basically, as a consumer or a client, you'll request a token, and then the service provider, something like Twitter or Facebook or even you, takes that token and gives a request token back to them. Then it directs users back to the service provider, and that's where they obtain the user authorization with the login page, and then send you back with that access token. Once you have that access token, you can make calls to their API to get information. So most of the examples I've seen, you don't actually use, you can log in using Facebook, you can log in using Twitter, but chances are they're actually using that key then to get information from Facebook or Twitter that you've put on it. So not always, but that's certainly the general idea of it. What I'd like to do is use it somehow where you can have you as a provider, and you can grant tokens to your applications without your applications actually having to go through the process of getting it. I think that's possible, but I haven't tried it too much yet. So I have a couple demos. The REST security one I won't have time for, but that's basically where I create a project using an Affuse's WS archetype, which uses Enunciate. Enunciate's a pretty nice project. It'll take your annotated Pojos and generate a whole website with documentation on it. So you can actually click on links, you can actually read what it all does, so that's a pretty nice way of doing it. And I just simply use Spring Security to secure that down and make you prompt to log in. And then the OAuth demos I have are a couple that I created a couple years ago. There's one called GWT OAuth. So I use GWT to write this app that talks to a bunch of different providers. And if you click on this link here, it goes to a blog post that talks all about it. We can go to LinkedIn, Google, or Twitter. So if we go to LinkedIn, it hits this LinkedIn URL, gets that authorization token, and they say, hey, they know the app name because I already registered it. And I fill my LinkedIn, and I say, okay, I'll allow it. Comes back, it's got that access token, calls the API, and gets my profile basically. Then I can start over, go to Twitter. Again, they know the name of my client because I've registered with them. Comes back to my application, gets all the tweets in the last few days. then lastly, you can also go to Google's Contacts API, sign in with your Google account, granted access, and it actually comes back. So I like doing the Google one. Let's try it again. Fails 1 out of 3 times. I hope I'm proving wrong. Could be a Firefox thing. Last night it failed first try and it was great because it does fail a lot. LinkedIn and Twitter actually work most of the time. And the beauty is that I actually wrote this, let's see here, back in 2009, so it's almost a couple of years, and I don't believe I used OAuth 2 or tried to use OAuth 2, but it still works. So that's good. And then the other demo I have is with Rails. And this just logs into LinkedIn and Twitter. And there's a Rails OAuth plugin out there that I updated to work with the latest version. I think there's other plugins now that do this, but this is just a simple example to show how it works. And then there's also, if you're using Spring Security, there's a Spring Security OAuth project that actually has a couple demos in there called Sparkle and Toner. And I won't actually bring those up. But you can download that. They just had a 1.0 M3 release about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. So you can certainly download that and use it. And those are just links to various demos. So to penetrate, the easiest thing to do is to download 2 open source tools, either Zed Attack Proxy and Burp Suite. Burp Suite I don't think is actually open source, but there is a free version of it that you can use to actually find vulnerabilities in your application. There's also the OWASP Top 10, where they talk about the top 10 vulnerabilities, and the OWASP Testing Guide and Code Review Guide. And OWASP WebGo is a great project for actually learning more about security as like a VM instance where you can actually go through and learn things and fix things on an actual application. And OWASP, just in case you didn't know, is the Open Web Application Security Project. It's mainly about web app security, not so much about securing servers and networks and things of that sort. They have a bunch of tools and books, controls, libraries, and a lot of cutting-edge research there. So the top 10 for 2010 are injection, mainly SQL injection, cross-site scripting, broken authentication and session management, and then obviously request forgery is a big one. Security misconfiguration, failure to restrict your URLs, also invalidated redirects are all pretty areas of vulnerability. And then to protect, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use firewalls, right? Standard firewalls, everyone uses them. And a new thing that's really got popular in the last few years is web app firewalls. There's also IDS and IDPs, which are intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems, audits, penetration tests, code reviews, and static tools. And the interesting thing I got from a guy in the industry that actually works in OWASP and does this kind of stuff, he said that firewalls are mostly useless, although web app firewalls can be very effective if you tune them properly. IDPs are mostly useless too. Audits are good to find problems with process accountability, but largely useless from a technical perspective. Penetration tests are good for getting budget for security and raising awareness about security. But mostly done by the wrong folks who just run tools without having a business context about the assessment. Code reviews with static analysis tools can be useful, but usually only consultants can drive the tools effectively and must be combined with threat modeling to be effective. So you really need to understand your business to do really good security analysis and protection. Firewalls are stateless firewalls, which actually never recorded any previous information about requests that are coming in. So what they came up with in the mid-90s was stateful firewalls to prevent DOS attacks. And the web app firewalls are inspired in 1996 by the PHF CGI exploit. You might think that's PHP, but it really is PHF, or there's a typo on Wikipedia. I don't think so. In the web app framework market, or web app firewall market, 234 million in 2010, and they project it's going to grow 24% every year in the future. So it's probably a good idea to learn about this stuff. Gartner on firewalls. The leaders are Juniper and Checkpoint. There's some challenges in there. But this is not web app firewalls. It's like standard stateful firewalls that everyone probably has at their companies. So some of the vendors that sell this stuff, Imperva and F5 are the top ones for web app firewalls. There's some open source ones, Web9 and Mod Security. Web9 is only for IIS. Mod Security works on Apache and IIS. IDPs and IDSs, source fire and tipping point. Audits, pen testing, Electric Alchemy. That's David Campbell, who runs the OAuth group in Denver. Really nice guy, really good to work with. FishNet Security, it's my girlfriend's company, but they are one of the top companies in the US that does penetration testing and immunity. And basically the cost for all these, firewalls go for $200 for your home office, all the way up to $1 million for enterprises. Web app firewalls are typically 60 grand to 150K, depending on your environment. These IDPs and IDSs are 50K to 200K, and then no one reveals how much they cost for audits and pen testing, but it's probably about $500 an hour. And then Fortified and Barricode are 25K to 150K. So big business. I encourage you all to learn more about it, so when people try to sell you this stuff, you actually know if you need it. That's all I had. Thanks for coming.
All right, well, thanks for coming, everybody. I think we've got some door prizes to give away, and Don and Jason will be wandering around with a couple of boxes to collect everybody's entry forms. And as soon as we grab all those, I'll make some drawings, and then we